Welcome back, ATO family, for our 10th message from the host, Volume X. Before we get into today's guest, I'd like to give a few shout-outs and mentions. I'd like to thank Frontline Realty with DPD officers Wade Dews and Tyler Ramirez. They formed a program called Heroes Helping Heroes, and we formed a partnership with them, and they donated a percentage of their first responder sale to the ATO. They just sold their first house under this program, and at the clay shoot, they awarded us a check for $3,300 at our Kevin James clay shoot, and we want to thank you. Give a shout out to Willie Dobbs from Iowa for reaching out. We hear you. Congrats to Matt Janishek and Blair Caven for being awarded the Cedar Rapids PD Commendation of Valor for their actions on July 30th, 2022. I have a lot of people reach out to me through text, emails, on the email that I created for this podcast. And I post a lot of them on the social medias that we run. And some I just kind of keep to myself or share amongst the group because they're kind of personal, and I de-identify before I post. But I do want to give a shout out to Plano Officer Camry Payton, Jennifer Grantham. She reaches out all the time on Twitter, and she reached out after the Gordon Fulton episode and how that impacted her. Chaplain James Campbell and Walter Bautista from Wichita PD. Your messages are very encouraging. It means a lot to me, and it fuels Kent and I to keep pushing these out. I want to give a special thanks to all that sponsored, volunteered, and participated in the Kevin James Clay Shoot last week. And a very special thank you to Parker Owen for that sweet video. I'm ready to get into the meat here on this message from the host. First, I want to talk about our guest co-host, ATO board member, active Dallas police officer Joe Mino. Joe, say hello.
How are you doing?
There's a reason Joe's involved with this, because he's deeply involved with Carry the Load, actually part of the relays. Joe, can you kind of tell the listener a little bit about what you know, a little bit about yourself and your involvement with Carry the Load? Sure.
So I've been a Dallas police officer for 25 years. Prior to coming here, I was in the Air Force as a police officer, and then I actually joined the Navy Reserve, and I was also a Master at Arms, which is a police officer. So when I actually found out about Carry the Load, I'm like, you have an organization that supports first responders and military. I go, well, that's me. So, I jumped right in.
Fit it perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be involved in this year's national relays?
Yes.
Okay. Can you kind of tell the listener a little bit about that?
So the national relay, so Carry the Load does, their big May event, and there's 5 national relays. They cover 20,000 miles, 48 states, and over 30 days. And they walk with the flag, and they honor the first responders and military that have given their life. So I'll be doing the New England relay, and I'll be picking it up in Nashville, and I'll walk back to Dallas with them.
How far is that?
I don't know. Last year I did 137 miles that I actually walked. They zigzag all over the place. So
yeah, that's.
Sometimes I wake up in one state, or I start walking in one state, and then I wake up in another state. So because you're on that bus, and there's really no windows.
So and there's intermittent sleeping. And,
oh yeah,
yeah. Wow. Thanks for doing that for us. Thanks for representing ATO like you do. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Going to introduce our guest. Today we're sitting with a true patriot. He's part of an organization that is committed to restoring the true meaning of Memorial Day. It was formed by Navy SEALs Clint Bruce and Steve Holly. Today I'd like to welcome on the host of the Carry the Load podcast, Lessons from the Front, Todd Boeding. Todd, thanks for being on with us.
Joe, I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we met at Cops Cop and hit it off, and here we are. I've been, Cops Cop was in January, into January. We've been trying to get something together, and all of us have our normal jobs. So it
Well,
kinda
we're
gets in the
big
way.
time podcasters. I mean, it's
Big
hard to
time.
match those schedules up.
Big time podcasters. All right, can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your military background, and how you got involved with Carry the Load?
I try to just kind of sum it up as simply as I'm just a dude trying to be a dude. And what I mean by that is, I'm a common guy. I'm a common guy who chose the path of, serving in uniform, probably more out of necessity than anything else. So I ended up in the Marine Corps because I was, well, let's just say that the dean of my college called me in and said, hey, Mr. Boeding, I don't think we're ready for one another. That is a true story. And as a result, I left and ended up joining the Marine Corps. I knew I needed some discipline, some structure, and I always had a great admiration and respect for those in uniform. And so it was kind of a natural calling to me in that regard. So, I'm born and raised in Dallas, so, it's pretty cool to me to come and just walk into a Dallas police location and, feel like I'm welcomed and not for the wrong reason. So, I'm just a Dallas guy.
Yeah, that could go either way with walking into a police facility.
Well, and it has before,
Yeah,
Joe.
okay.
That's why I bring that up.
Hey, there was a time in my life that it could have went down a different path. So how did you get involved with Carry the Load?
I got involved in Carry the Load because when I left the Marine Corps, when you put on the uniform every day, you have a true sense of purpose. There's no question mark about it. When you take off the uniform, you lose that sense of purpose very quickly. I've got a buddy of mine that recently left the Navy. I mean, he retired from the Navy, and he called me the other day, and he was very distraught. And it was really it was coming out through his observations and interactions in the civilian world and with civilian leadership. But what I tried to explain to him is, hey, this is normal. What you're going through is you've lost your sense of purpose a little bit. And so and we all go through it. You guys, when you take off the uniform for the last time, you're going to go through it too. And so Carry the Load kind of helped me restore that sense of purpose because it allowed me to be involved in something that was about the bigger picture. And I don't know that there is a bigger picture out there than an organization that reveres those who gave everything, never got to take off the uniform because they died in service for you and me.
What is it about the uniform that inspires you and it speaks to you?
I think that's a great question. The uniform to me is symbolic. I mean, obviously some people don't wear the uniform every day. I mean, you guys aren't in uniform now, but the badge is your uniform. And so in the military, the uniform was symbolic of a greater sense of duty. It's service above self. It's putting others before your own needs. And that really is basic human interaction, basic human behavior. The majority of human beings, if you really force them to commit one way or the other, are going to derive more satisfaction. They're going to derive more fulfillment from helping others than just paying attention to themselves.
Yeah, that's one thing that really drew me when Ed Lujan asked me if I want to be part of the ATO. I'd been, helping with the organization for a little bit, but getting involved with the advisory board, now I'm up on the, I'm one of the board members, and I do our podcast for the ATO to spread the message, and we'll talk about that later. But being a part of something and giving back in service, and somebody asked me recently of how I got into doing this, and in wellness unit too is what I'm in, and also just it's service, it's giving service, helping your peers and your brotherhood, as opposed to when you, as a police officer and even in the military, a lot of the people that you're protecting and helping are strangers to you. You're protecting your brothers around you, but your missions are usually for someone you'll never know or meet. Right. But to help, and I love helping people, but when you help some of your peers and give back, and then whether it's through inspiration, financial assistance, or just being there to talk to, it means a lot more 6 months, a year later when you see that person down the road doing better, you can kind of give them a knowing nod that, you know, you might have been a part of that.
Yeah.
It's very inspiring to do something like that.
Yeah, I think all you have to do is you know, again, keep it simple. Look at look at what happens on Christmas. As children, we love the gifts we receive, but as we get older, it's the ability to give a gift and derive that fulfillment, that pleasure from watching others benefit. And you know, some of us, I think, in society, unfortunately, lose touch with that. Those who are in uniform don't. And you know, it may get washed out from time to time, but there's always something that will happen that will bring you back to that reality.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I kind of, again, I'm a simple guy. I'm just a dude trying to be a dude, and that's how I look at it. I mean, my wife loves giving gifts. I mean, now she gives me grief when I give her gifts because I'm not good at it, and so I get a lot of satisfaction when I do get a good one. But she's really good at giving gifts because she's very thoughtful.
She puts a lot of effort and thought
Absolutely.
into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. She buys her own gifts at Christmas now and just makes me wrap them.
Puts from Todd.
That's right.
Santa Todd. So I want to talk about the history of the Carry the Load, the organization. Can you tell the listener, listen, y'all have been around for a long time, very successful. There's a lot of people that know about you. But there's also, I think there's a lot of people that really don't understand the origins of it and the mission. Can you kind of tell the listener about that?
Yeah, I'll take it a step further. We're really trying to really focus on Dallas. I mean, there are a lot of people in Dallas that are not familiar with Carry the Load. And that's, you know, as good of a job as we've done, shame on us for not being able to, you know, to get more champions of this cause out there. Carry the Load, though, is about, you know, restoring the true meaning of Memorial Day. On a larger level, it's about connecting the 99% who've never worn the uniform in any way to the 1% who have. And that's what's really, you know, kind of unfortunate to me is that, you know, we get a tremendous amount of gratitude by putting on the uniform and serving others. But getting back to, you know, the true meaning of Memorial Day, the history is Clint Bruce, one of our founders, went to essentially a backyard barbecue one year, and he saw everybody, and this is for Memorial Day, and he saw everybody, you know, joking around, having a really good time, and not understanding why Memorial Day exists. Everybody looked at it as an opportunity to, you know, to get together, but no one was really paying any kind of reverence towards those who made the ultimate sacrifice. And he got tired of losing his buddies, and it seemed like no one cared. So he did what, he did what a lot of people would do. He put a lot of people in the service. He put a pack on. He loaded it with a pound for each friend that he'd lost, and he started humping around White Rock Lake. And as he comes around the corner, he sees this older gentleman. He had his earbuds in and just kind of off in his own world. And that, by the way, is because his wife, Amy, who's a wonderful individual, saw the pain that he was experiencing and said, "You need to get out of here before you hurt someone else, if not yourself." And so that's when he went and he got his pack on. And as he's coming around the lake, he sees this older gentleman sitting on the park bench. And this older gentleman, World War II and Korean veterans have a certain look to them. You can just tell. And he recognized this in this gentleman right away. And the gentleman said something to him, so he pulled out his earphones and he said, "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't understand what you said." And he said, "Who are you carrying?" And that really kind of born the idea in his mind, as he says, the tumblers fell into place, because he realized that he was carrying the weight of those who never got to come home. They carried for us, and now it's our turn to carry for them. And that's what Carry the Load is all about. It doesn't mean that we can't have a good time on Memorial Day, but it's remembering why Memorial Day is there to begin with. And it really kind of morphed into, you know, it took us a while to understand the messaging as well. You know, the very first one I went to, I took beer. I'm like, you know, hey, I'm going to get together with these other veterans, and we're going to have a beer. It wasn't there yet, though. And the reason it wasn't there is because there was still so much healing that had to be done. And you can't truly celebrate the lives of others until you've healed. And so you watch some of these guys now who've been coming out to carry the load for years, and they're healed. I mean, it's a totally different atmosphere. But there's always some that have not gotten to that point, and those are the people that we're trying to connect with and bring in.
And they'll get there eventually. It's just you got to have that connectivity with people that you trust, or you at least have. They've been in the trenches. They've been in the trenches. It's not Rick from HR coming and checking off a box and meeting with people. It could be, Joe. It could be, and here's what I mean by that. This is one of my favorite stories of Carry the Load, because it was a very personal story. But one year I surprised my mother with a storyboard of her brother. And the storyboard, for listeners who aren't familiar, those are kind of like mobile headstones. It's how we remember to say the names of those who never got to take off the uniform. Well, I'd always heard of my uncle who was killed in May of 1968 in Vietnam, but I didn't know him, and so I said, well, Dad, I need your help. We're going to surprise Mom this year. I had a headstone made for Corky. And my mom loves to go up on the trail at River Sean and walk the trail and read the storyboards. And she's going from one to the next to the next. And lo and behold, she comes across her brother. And she let out this gasp. And then she started reading it. And she broke down in a way that I have never seen my mother before or since break down and cry. And I get emotional talking about this because I didn't realize the impact it had. Well, here's the story behind the story. So yes, he was killed in May of 68. I was born in April of 69. When you do the math, you realize very quickly, she never had time to heal. She went from, oh my God, my brother's dead, to, oh my God, I have a child coming into this world, and I don't even know if I'm ready for that. And so watching her break down brought it all back to the main reason why we do this and why this is so important. And I thought, man, if this impacted my own mother like this with her brother, and it's been that long, I can only imagine what the families of the fallen who are still dealing with this just 2 and 3 years ago, what they're going through. It's a powerful scene out there, just seeing this. It is a family event. At all ages, you see that come out, and it's. Can you tell the listeners the dates?
Yes, it begins on the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. I think the gates open at noon, if I'm not mistaken. And you're right, it is a family event, which I'd like to stress a little bit more here in just a minute. But then it goes through. It goes through about noon on Memorial Day. And we do that for a reason. We do that for a reason because we want to come together as a community on Memorial Day. But then what we always try to do is encourage everyone, go be with your family today. Go be with your friends. And at 3 o'clock, that's the national moment of remembrance. Go do your backyard barbecues. Go do whatever it is you want to do. But at 3 o'clock, observe that one moment of silence to honor all of those who died because we matter. And, a big part of the event is, it's all the way through the evening. And, for anyone who has not been out there before, there's about 2 o'clock in the morning on Katy Trail, where all the not the headstones, but the storyboards are. It's the most unbelievably surreal feeling. You may not believe in ghosts, you may not believe in spirits, but if you go out there at 2 o'clock, you'll feel them. You will absolutely feel them. And yes, we encourage the families to come out there, Joe, because this is not a veteran thing. This is an American thing. And we got to start teaching our kids a better job of what it means to be a patriot.
And the true meaning of Memorial Day.
Yes, absolutely.
Because every one of those storyboards, there is a spider web of a story behind every one.
Correct.
It's like your mother with her brother and your uncle. It's every one of them. Every one of those storyboards has some sort of connectivity that touched many lives. Didn't even have to be friends, family, people they may have helped. There's such a, and there's everything's so symbiotic in the way we connect.
It is, and we were talking about wellness earlier, and one of the things people just don't understand, whether it's through, regardless, when someone leaves this earth, the impact that their death has, doesn't matter how. It just, when they're gone, the impact and the ripple effect is so profound. And you're right, there's a web of stories behind each one of those, and all the people that are impacted as a result of that storyboard you're reading, those words on a board, it's immeasurable.
So can you tell we were talking offline. We met at Cops Cop, mm-hmm. and we started talking about the Carry the Load podcast.
Right.
Can you get into that and tell the listener about it and your mission on it?
Yes. So it actually started as a book idea. And it was kind of my own version of of the story I told about Clint, in that, I got a little frustrated because I saw a lot of individuals writing books that were, 101 lessons I learned on the battlefield and, my experience. And I thought, I don't like a lot of those books because I think they're very egocentric. And the reality is that every one of us sitting here at this table, maybe we don't have a story that can be turned into a book, but we got a story that belongs in a book. We've got a story that someone is going to learn a lesson from. Someone can benefit from that story. So I started interviewing people and gathering these stories. And, the first one was a guy who's also a very good friend of Carry the Load, and he tells a story of how he got into a fight with an IED and he won, and an IED being a roadside bomb. But he basically was launched, about 30 feet through the air, landed, wakes up, fully conscious through the whole thing, wakes up, sees all of his squad around him. And the first thing that comes to mind is, who's got the perimeter? And the lesson that jumps into my head is, oh yeah, when bad things happen, things don't stop. It's not static. It's a dynamic environment. It keeps going. So yeah, the bad guys are still out there, and y'all experience this obviously in the police force. If somebody gets hurt, crime doesn't stop. So that was the lesson that I took away from it. So I started interviewing people, and then I'm talking to this one guy who's actually Air Force, tells a story that was extremely emotional. And this was as a pilot, a cargo pilot. And we walk out and I say, he says, is that what you were looking for? I said, man, that's exactly what I was looking for. And he goes, good, because that was really therapeutic for me. And I went, man, people don't need to read my version of this. They need to hear the actual stories. And so that set off on this crusade of trying to pretend like I knew what I was doing as a podcaster and talking to people and, being, my best Mike Wallace on, that's probably not the best example for 60 Minutes, but, trying to do my own interviews and get into the meat of the story. But the bottom line is, yeah, there's a lot of really good lessons that every one of us who served in uniform can teach somebody else. The biggest difference is our stories are typically life and death versus no stakes in the game. And so, setting out to tell those stories is what I've tried to do. But again, like we talked about, it's probably more for the benefit of those telling the stories a lot of times. Yeah,
it is therapeutic. It's therapeutic for me to sit with an individual and get their story and see, and you just feel the energy. I mean, it really is. And I have been extremely lucky since I've been doing this podcast, and I've had amazing guests. They've carried the show, and that's what it's designed for.
Absolutely.
I'm just kind of
I feel like I'm talking way too much behind a microphone today.
No, you're great. No,
because I'm used to being on your side.
The roles are reversed. You just want to keep a light hand on the steering wheel and nudge them. And I've been lucky to get some amazing stories and very deep and heartbreaking stories. And some people tell their stories about the worst day of their life, or multiple days of their life that haunt them, haunt their family, haunt their friends, and it's therapeutic for me in a lot of ways. But your podcast is touching people out there that you don't even know. You don't know who's listening. You'll never know of how many people have heard somebody's story. They may listen to 10 stories. Okay, that's a good story. That's cool. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, I could take some life skills away from what this individual said. But that one resonates with somebody. You may never know, Todd.
No, you don't. And honestly, there are times when I go, oh man, I don't know if I can get to this. But then just for the reasons that you're talking about, you say, you know what? I've had enough people reach out to me and say, thank you. I've had enough people reach out to me and say, this was really neat for me to hear. And it was exactly what I needed that day, to where, I feel like I got to keep going,
Yeah, it definitely is fuel and motivation because, everything has a shelf life, and
even us,
and doing these kind of shows, it's exhausting some days. You're like a sponge when you're sitting there with a guest. You really are like a sponge, and you're taking in a lot of energy. And the days that I record, especially on emotional ones, and especially on emotional ones with somebody that I'm friends with, man, I go home and it's like I took a Benadryl, and I'm flat out mentally and physically exhausted. But I wake up the next day and, the ball keeps bouncing. Yeah. Work keeps bouncing. And then you got to edit these things. And then, there's a lot of behind the scene things, as you know, that go into these stories. And I always want everybody that shows up and sits down with us to feel they got respect. Their story is their story, how they want it presented. And, I want them to feel like a part of the family.
It's important that we humanize that which is very easy to be dehumanized. And unfortunately, that's what I feel like happens a lot in the world of policing. As a matter of fact, you guys are, all the defund the police. That's you're taking the human element out of that, and it's so important to humanize that which. Again, sometimes we forget to humanize it. We try to take the humans out of it, and you can't.
You can't take the human emotion out. People don't realize how emotional the first responder and military jobs are. I mean, the grief that military has to deal with.
Yeah, I'm gonna trump you there a little bit, to be honest with you. And Frederick Frazier actually at our very first Carry the Load nonprofit partner event. Mm-hmm. We're all talking about the state of mental health inside of the military and all the suicides that were just really ramping up. And he kind of very subtly raised his hand, and I know that's hard to believe with Frederick that he subtly did anything, but he kind of raised his hand and said, "I don't think y'all understand. Okay, you got these guys that are dealing with PTS out of the military, but then they come right into the police force." And now they're in a 4D war, and 4-dimensional warfare, and they've never dealt with it. And so you guys, and I think that's what a lot of people need to understand. Y'all don't have the ability to get away from it.
No, not till you retire, and then you're still carrying a head full of trauma, and and that's why now Dallas PD and other departments across the country are trying to do something to help. Nothing is perfect. I mean, and what we've experienced, and people that go in the military, Joe, I mean, you come back over and you do this job for 20, 30 years, and you're stacking on. It's cumulative. You're just stacking on more trauma and experience.
It's scar tissue.
Yes, on top of scar tissue. And we're trying our best to at least try to equip people with tools as opposed to just bury it, compartmentalize it, drink. We're trying to give officers better tools to move forward so they can have something after they're done.
Well, we're talking about it in ways that we've never talked about it before, and that's a good thing. Now, like everything, we can take it too far because there is a certain amount of scar tissue that's important. I mean, it allows you to compartmentalize things in a way to get your job done. And so, we just have to be able to kind of keep this in our sights without overdoing it and taking it too far.
Yeah.
But I've been fortunate to talk to a few of your folks on the police force. Chief Garcia was one of them. That was a great interview. DeMarcus Turner, and Frederick Frazier. I mean, all just every time I talk to guys from the police force, I get a different perspective of what y'all deal with. And one of the things that Carry the Load is really into, we used to have a lot of veterans who got really upset with us because we included first responders in Carry the Load and in Memorial May and all that good stuff. And Clint did a really good job of putting in perspective when he would tell these guys, you would not have gone overseas to do what you did if you could not count on those here at home protecting our streets. You would not have done that in good conscience and just left your family. And so that was really that partnership, if you will. Now, Memorial Day is about the veterans, but everything leading up to that, it's about all of us. And it's so important that that we maintain that partnership, because that's what it is.
I like how you put that there's somebody that had to remain home to hold the line while you went out and towed the other lines. And
absolutely, and that's what our first responders do.
What kind of future projects do y'all have going?
So Carry the Load right now, our big focus this year is Carry the Flag. Now, Carry the Flag is it's been around for a few years, and this really goes back to a conversation that that Stephen Hawley, the other co-founder, and I had. Actually, the way I said that sounded like I was naming myself a co-founder, not me. But Stephen and I talked about the importance of making sure that our youth understand what it truly means to be a patriot. And what we realized with Carry the Load early on is that it's not that people didn't care about Memorial Day. They do. But if they don't know how to care, it's kind of like good leaders. Okay, you can't be mad at somebody for not being a good leader if no one's ever shown them how to be a leader. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do with Carry the Flag, is make sure that the children especially know what it means to be a patriot. Doesn't mean you have to put on the uniform. It means you have to be patriotic, which is a much deeper conversation. But that's our biggest push right now, is getting the next generation involved.
I love it. Where can they find your podcast?
They can go to carrytheload.org, and it is on there. Lessons from the Front is on, it's on YouTube. It's on the major.
I listen on Apple.
On Apple?
Yeah.
And I mean, I like to watch things because I like to see people's reactions. So I'm one of those guys who's I'm more visual. And so that's why I say it is on YouTube as well. But it's on Apple. It's on Spotify.
How do you, I'm going to get into the video question. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the video? Because I've had other people that have reached out wanting us to do video interviews, and and there's a lot of people that I know would not want to, especially when the level of emotion that comes out on some of them, and there's just a lot of people who don't want to be caught. How do you feel about it?
I've never had somebody tell me that that they wouldn't do an interview on camera, and I mean, I've had some large grown men cry. It's again, that's okay. And I think that's what we're trying to get across, to people, is it doesn't make you less of a man because you shed a tear.
Right.
I like the visual because, I mean, there's times when I'll listen, but there's times where I like to just sit down and kind of watch and read people's body language, because that to me tells a story behind a story.
We read the body language in here when we do the episodes, and it's real interesting to watch somebody when you're kind of leading up to a critical incident, and everything's loose and it's casual. But then when you see some of them start talking about a shooting they were in, or they answered a call with a dead body or an infant. The mannerisms change.
Yes.
The focus changes. The handshake. And sometimes you'll see people kind of mimicking what they did. Like if they had a firearm, you'll see them with their hands, moving their hands like they did the day that it happened. It's real interesting to watch that. And then when that part's over, it kind of slows back down. But it is fascinating to watch the human reaction to it.
Yeah, the human behavior side of things kind of takes you back to that moment.
Yeah.
And I had one guy who was a contractor actually over in Iraq, and the Marine unit that he was with, they were looking for a specific bad guy, and they came across a torture room. And when he was walking me through everything that happened in the torture room, he went back there to the point where he was smelling the smells again. And, you want to talk about dehumanization, holy cow. But yeah, that's why, I think some people, they want to see that, what that really means. They can imagine it, but if they can see it,
right,
it allows them to go to another level.
If we ever do go with video, we got to start wearing pants on these.
Yeah, we'll have to put our pants on if we do video.
Yeah, I was a little curious about that when I came in today.
Yeah.
You got great legs, though. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. It's a little chilly. So I was reading, since 2011, Carry the Load has raised over $38 million, and 93% goes to the organization, which that's astounding.
Well, yeah, it goes to the programs.
Right.
It goes to the programs. And that number, we're very, very proud of that number. And the staff that we have, it's a skeleton staff, and they do so much. And, Debbie Wright, our executive director, and the team she's assembled, and they just... Honestly, they take me back to my Marine Corps days, and it was always a point of pride for us to do so much with so little. And that's kind of what I feel our team does. And then to, 93, 94 cents of every dollar going to the programs, rather than, we everything's organic for us. But the good thing is, too, though, it's a movement. Okay, this isn't just a charity. This is a movement to make sure that people understand what Memorial Day is intended to be. And when you have a movement like this, as Joe was talking about earlier, the fuel becomes the champions of the of the movement, and they're out there doing a lot of the work. So we don't need the overhead that some organizations that will remain nameless do. So
yeah, we won't talk about them.
No.
There's plenty of them out there.
There are plenty.
It is a movement. It's a symbol of what this country is, and what this country is about, going back to its roots, and there has been service going back to our origins of this country, and this is the way we remember them and carry them, carry their memory forever.
Yeah, it's it's the sense of belonging, though, to a tribe like this, I think, is what's really important. I think that's why so many people, I've we've had people coming for 12 years now, and Joe, you've seen it out on the relay. It becomes a community, and there's a reason why the vast majority of Americans, or the population of the world, live in close proximity to one another, because we need that interaction. That's a common human behavior. So seeing it boiled down into Carry the Load, which has such a meaning for those that we honor, it's humbling to be a part of it.
I think it's a perfect way to wrap it up. Todd, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day. And I know Carry the Load's ramping up. I'm actually, when I get done with this, I'm going to go downstairs, and Randy's going to help me get the podcast Facebook going for Carry the Load.
Awesome.
Yes. So please listen to Lessons from the Front with Todd Boeding. Hear their incredible stories on all streaming platforms. YouTube, if you want to if you want to see his handsome face, because I've been sitting here staring into his eyes the past half hour.
This is getting weird, guys.
Yeah. Hey, it always does. ATL family, until next time.